actually assume both coming from Christian principles, yet racist, we talked about that, use the literacy of slaves, the illiteracy of slaves, to keep them ignorant of biblical Christianity. So a lot of people will tell you, that slaves were taught Christianity in order to keep them enslaved. When we would say, no, they couldn't read, so a brand of white supremacist Christianity, even though it had the gospel in it, I would say, but a form of white supremacist Christianity, minus the understanding of the equality of our sinfulness, that's what it was minus, was fed to slaves. It's an orange book. I meant to bring it out, remind myself of that lays out the training of slave masters. So on Amazon, to this day, a book that is not the Willie Lynch letter, that's really a fabricated letter, but it does sum up the idea of what slaves were taught in relation to an imperialist form of Christianity. And so this book is the layout of how slave masters mutually trained each other to utilize Christianity in a way that was manipulative and a doctrine of demons to enslave slaves to them and allow and view themselves in their slave state as invaluable, yet their place as slaves as God's place for them. We'll talk about that a little more later. It was further emphasized in the Schofield Bible. No, how many of you ever heard of the Schofield Bible? Any of you? Any guys? How many of you heard of the Schofield Bible note about Genesis, about the curse of Ham? How many of you heard of the curse of Ham? It's funny, if you read the chapter, he didn't curse Ham, he cursed Canaan. So you can't make the entire descendants of Ham, who happened to migrate from Saudi Arabia, modern-day Saudi Arabia, and Palestine into Africa, which again was a part of Africa in people's minds back then, for some, based on what historian and geographer that you talk to. And so that idea of the curse of Ham was an embarrassment to evangelicalism because it began to reinforce racism in this country theologically. And when you theologically reinforce an idea, it attempts to legitimize it from a heavenly standpoint that this ideal or idea is true. Are you tracking with me? And so what had to be done is even the people that taught Hebrew, Greek, systematic theology, biblical theology, eschatology, soteriology, sanctification, and ecclesiology, and knew all of that stuff, still couldn't exegetically look at basic Bible study methods and recognize the fact that Canaan was cursed, not Ham. In other words, that was one of the sons of Ham. Okay, and so all of those concepts tried to reinforce this reality. We talked about a revisionist history. So what happened it wasn't just the revision of the information of history. It was the revisionists of the people and their ethnicities who did stuff in history. And so we see that. So the problem of black identity among African Americans. How many of you will agree that African American, that there is a identity crisis among black people in this country? That deep identity crisis is really supposed to be taken care of in the Lord Jesus Christ. The challenge, though, is a few things. First off, slavery. Slavery in this country was the beginning, really not even slavery, the kidnapping and selling of us on the shores of West Africa was the first point of post-traumatic stress disorder beginning. Then those who survived the Middle Passage of being defecated on, and those women who weren't raped and thrown overboard, and men who were raped and thrown overboard, who had to live beside the stench of their brothers and sisters according to the flesh, dying beside them, who weren't thrown in the waters, dealing with the post-traumatic stress of being on the bottom of a hot boat, chained and developing calluses and everything right there under the boat. I forgot how many miles that you could smell the stench of the slave ship from. Then to come to the country and then to be enslaved and sold on the auction block in your new